Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Jasmine 1 for an amazing panel on waves. How many of you in this room have used AI in any form? Hands up, please. Almost everyone. Can you please join us on stage, everybody, then? Okay. So the fascinating thing about this panel is that you have some exponents here who've seen AI from every possible lens that you can imagine. And the flavors that they're going to take away from this conversation is, where are we today? How soon are we going to get to where everyone says AI is going to take us? I'd like to start by asking my two panelists, Dan and Guy, to give us their opening comments, because the challenge for this panel is that we are supposed to tell you how the impossible is going to be crafted. Can we please start? I'd like to start with the human side of things and then come to the new intelligences, if I may. So, Guy, crafting the impossible. How have you been crafting the impossible? How are you looking at it now? We're coming to later on what happens next with AI, but tell us a little bit about this magic that you have up your sleeves.
Okay, well, I started in film over 45 years ago with the Mad Max world, and started crafting and designing and being a stunt performer, which has then gone on to become a coordinator and now an action designer and a director. And the main difference that's happened over the course of that time is when we very first started in the film industry, and this is in the early 80s, as a physical stunt performer, you only were able to do what you were physically capable of doing. So you could jump, run, whatever you could physically do, that was what the capabilities were. What's happened over the course of time is that the technology that keeps coming through has allowed us then to design and execute stunts at a way higher level than we could possibly do before. And that is all based on systems and what I call my toolbox, and depending on what's in the toolbox as to what we can pull out and use. So every iteration of new technology, we've been able to do that. So this whole idea of a new frontier of digital innovation and AI, for us, is a positive, because it means that we can now use that to design action that is even beyond, because every time I start a film, they all say, we just want something amazing that we haven't seen before. So the idea of having a toolbox that allows you to do that is what I'm looking forward to in the advances of what the digital technology will allow us.
Thank you. That's a great start. It brings me back to, how many of you remember seeing Disney's The Jungle Book? Hands up, please. Everyone. So, as you know, that movie was almost entirely digital, except for one boy. And here's a little bit of, when you come to a Waves panel like this, we tell you a secret. For 30% of that movie, the boy wasn't real, because we have to look after our actors and make sure that they don't fall off a landslide onto a buffalo that can go further down. Disney had only one boy. And therefore, that's really where I think we were experimenting in the early days of virtual production, which then became much more ubiquitous in The Lion King and many other shows that companies like DNEG and MPC and Framestore and many have done. And to bring that world to you, how are we expanding the cinematic possibility, going from the human intelligence to the machine intelligence, and in the future, the artificial intelligence, and how is that going to be the next gig for you?
I mean, yeah, my whole career, and guys too, has been about a sequence of innovations and technological advancements, but really what drives those ultimately is the ideas that people have, and we're constantly, exactly as Guy said, being asked to do something you've never seen before. I think on top of that, the need to try to provide new entertainment that is visually striking is the fact that audiences like yourselves are becoming more savvy. You're beginning to understand more and more about how we do these things, and we need to keep ahead of that. And so we constantly look for new tools, new ways to make our process both more efficient, but also better and better, and enable, although physically based stuff are really, really key. It's how do we help elevate those and achieve things that people have not seen before. And that's where I think AI is it's exciting. I think it's early days. There's a lot of the potential we're still exploring, but that's, as with many of the innovations that have happened in the visual effects field over the last 20, 30 years, where that goes and how we lead it and how we imagine it, it's very exciting, and love for you all to be part of that going forward.
So, Guy, it's possibly easier for everyone to wrap their heads around the fact that in the virtual world, we're going to use more virtualization, more real-time, more everything else. But in the world of stunts, what are the things that you did 5 or 10 years ago that will be different with AI in the years to come?
That's a great question. So the big changes for us in the stunt world have been, as I mentioned, when we first started back in the early era, we didn't actually even have a facility of having safety cables because there was no way that you could actually remove a safety cable. So you literally couldn't have them. Then if we fast forward to something like Fury Road, the big difference in that is the fact that on all of those tanker sequences where you saw people running around and on tops of the tankers and all the polecats working, they were all live and real, but the visual effects team, which we partner up with incredibly closely now, they were able to remove for us all of the truss, all the safety cables, everything that allowed us to then put the physical performer way beyond what he was physically capable of, and it allowed us to get the vision that George Miller, the director, was after, but we were able to do it in a way that was incredibly safe. So that's been a standard now for probably 15 years that we've got that ability with the visual effects brothers to be able to remove those. What's really exciting about the latest transition of that, if we're talking about things that are more AI-based, is the fact that now the technology to allow to be able to change people's faces is now getting, very good. And so for me, designing action, it means that if we have a very complex sequence and we might want to do it in one shot, in the past we've always had to cut away at some stage from the stunt performer to then do maybe a close-up of the actor or actress. What we're saying now is with the technology that people like Dan are working with now, it means that we can actually have a singular shot of a stunt performer doing an amazing physical activity, but it ends in a close-up in one shot of the actor or actress. That's the new part of the toolkit that I've now got, that from a design point of view, we can design that shot. Now, the ability of that is now based on the digital innovation that Dan's working on in the AI world.
So Dan, here's a question. When I look around this room in the first few rows in front of me, I see the studio heads who employ thousands of roto artists, for example. And the question that everyone wants to ask is, things like de-aging and things like rotoscopy and things of this sort, the debate is on right now. Is AI going to be a tool to assist this to become bigger, better, bolder, and for them to progress down their careers in the 2D track? Or is it going to be transformative and different and disruptive where they have to learn new skills? Where are you on that paradigm and that thinking?
To date, though, I feel like it gets you a large amount of the way, but there's almost always a remaining part that needs the artistry, and that's where the really qualified, experienced eyes, the likes of yourselves, are still critical. I do think inherently in that there is, I don't know if it's a need to reskill, but it's an opportunity to actually take on the things that humans are inherently better at as of now. Like, I think AI in those capacities is still taking on sort of procedural aspects. The other part of AI that is discussed a lot is the kind of generative idea of creative visuals. And that is another really interesting zone where you can, of course, through AI, create a vast array of ideas, should we say, that come from feeds or things seeds that are fed to it. But even in those instances, it still takes the human eye and the human artistry to pick and choose from those and determine what you want to pull from that and what you can use to the maximum ability going forward. So guess it's a mixed answer to the question, because I still feel the human involvement in the visual effects side of things is still critical. That human eye and sensibility is still very, very needed. And the same way that performances, I think, they're not going away. I think that the strongest stories, the strongest emotional and action-packed visuals come from performances that are delivered and then augmented and adapted. So I do not see AI replacing all that we do, not for a long time and perhaps ever, but I do think that it's going to...
Can you define long time?
I think that's a very difficult thing to answer. The rate at which, yes, technology increases, but I think it will bring other newer things that we don't even know yet in good time.
Guy, the line between actors and avatars is blurring. So in the past, you would get an award vis-a-vis another actor, a stunt actor. But now you have to compete with an avatar. How do you feel about that? Digital doubles, meta-humans, this kind of world that we're all seeing, maybe not to the level of the emotion that you bring to your stunt, but it's still coming. What's your view? Are they going to copy you? Are they going to imitate you? Are they going to exceed you? What's going to happen?
I don't have a crystal ball on that, but it still has to have a basis of physicality that is real. And I don't think at the moment you can... We base a lot of our work on, we do a lot of motion capture, and our motion capture drives the avatars mostly that are used. The difference is you either, in an older world, it would be keyframe animation of an avatar, but just the way that we are up here talking, I'm waving my hands and we're all chatting and looking at each other, that's something that I'm naturally doing right now. If you were trying to keyframe that, it would take forever. So the difference is that you're still getting the real physics and the real emotion out of a moving body, and we still use that all the time. And so even if we're saying we're putting the body in a position that would kill a normal performer, we do it in a motion capture way that then we can actually then use that framework and that avatar, which is driven by the stunt performers, to then put them in a life-threatening situation. So right now, it's, for me, it all is still driven by the physical performance.
And I think the great example of this is the games industry, because 90% of all the AAA titles that we see are motion captured, aren't they? And then brought into either the same likeliness or another likeliness of a character that gets created. And that's been going on, I think, in the video games world for a long, long time, and more than any other place. And we'll come back to that. So you're still championing the cause of the human versus the avatar for this moment, right? That's great.
It's a combination. No, like, as I said, we use the motion capture world extensively when we're designing something. What we're currently working on now with Dan, there's probably 80% of the entire people that will appear on camera or in the final film are not human. So they have to be driven, and what drives them is the motion capture that comes from the human performance.
Right. So Dan, I think the world is changing where the stories of the past were stories that were told. But for the young people all over the world, the stories of the future are stories that they live within. And this is really the world, the whole creation of the story world, the franchises. Countries get built by it, right? New Zealand got built by a legacy of Lord of the Rings. The British industry got built by the Harry Potter world, and so on and so forth, and the DC and the Marvel worlds, etc. And I think what we are seeing that will happen with Waves, in my personal opinion, is that we'll begin to see the mega story worlds getting created out of India. I wanted to ask you this question, that the experience that you bring from a creative point of view, how are you seeing this change from the linear, big, blockbuster storytelling in movies to the creation of immersive worlds? The Sphere in Vegas now going to happen in many other places. We're seeing ABBA in an experience center in London, and we were working on the next show, which is the Elvis show in London, that we've done substantial work for. and the museums of, people are going to centers where they're surrounded by screens exactly like we are right now around us. We are all screen agers, no matter if they're 25 or I'm 40. But the main point here is, how do you look at that change from linear storytelling and the virtualization of what we've done through visual effects to interactive and immersive experiences?
I mean, in a way, large screen entertainment cinema has always been about trying to achieve more and more immersive feeling. I mean, the reason that I think most of us go to a cinema is to feel involved in that in a way that we typically can't when we're sitting at home watching a television. I think as televisions have got bigger and home audio systems have got better, we can experience more similar feeling to that. And really, as a result of that, I think things like the ABBA experience you mentioned and the Sphere are kind of things that people are needing to develop in order to attract people to experiences that they cannot have at home. Stories, I don't know that they necessarily need to be immersive, but I think it's obviously exciting that our technology can now deliver us worlds that we can kind of be within or feel more immersed in. It also brings up a very interesting reanalysis of how you tell stories in immersive environments. Like if you are in a virtual VR environment, how do you focus someone's attention on the right things at the right time? We have a relatively easy kind of device when you have a screen that you can see everything at one time, and you can use focus, you can use lighting to kind of guide your attention, and obviously editing and pace. But if you're in a world that's just linear and continuous, how do you guide somebody through that story? And I think that's really interesting in itself, and there's still things that we're learning about how you tell stories in those environments. But I think that they end up being, it's almost a different form of storytelling. I don't personally think that it replaces the way that we traditionally view stories, in the same way that books haven't been replaced. Maybe less and less people read them, but they still hold, I think, an important part. And what I still like in that realm is that it relies on a lot of your imagination, and that I still feel is really, really important in the way that we access and interpret stories, however visually presented. It's like our imagination is always a key part of that.
I raise this question because one of the reasons that we haven't been able to scale the film industry in India to the point that we could potentially do, because we have phenomenal talent, phenomenal stories, is we are underserved in terms of screens. And if you look at the world around us, if you take, for example, the exploding expectation and population and the ability for transactions in the Middle East, you're seeing that many screens there. There's lots of centers coming up. There's lots of other ways by which the LED revolution is going to make people consume stories in very different ways, and that was the direction of my question. In many parts of the world, that's going to happen. And I also think it's been aided and abetted by video games, right? Because young people are absorbed by that, right? I mean, the young kid that we left back in the room there is absorbed by an interactive experience, and that's why we are sitting here comfortably on the stage. And I think that's going to be the way that we go forward. So I wanted to ask the question that in this environment, do you see that there could be, I mean, there's still phenomenal shows, the big shows and the big performances that I love to go to, the Cirque du Soleil, for example, right? Is a phenomenal ability for seeing live actors and the immersiveness of screens, of cinematic language that they're surrounded by, and music and everything else. Do you see that being a trend, that actors that get replaced maybe in more linear storytelling by avatars, but they will then go on to different types of storytelling and performances? And would you do that if you were 20-year-old today?
Look, I think what it all allows, as Dan was talking about, is an ability to tell a story in a totally different way. And the difference is that it allows the accessibility of anybody in the audience or anybody to tell a story in an incredibly enriched way compared to how it used to be. I mean, we've all, as film people, we all hear stories of Steven Spielberg using, video 8mm film to do train crashes in his basement. and that was a way that he was able to tell his stories. Now anybody with access to a phone, or a PC can basically make incredible stories themselves. So it's really just different levels of storytelling that are accessible to people, but it also allows different levels of storytelling for people to go in and watch it and be engaged. I do come from an era that Cirque du Soleil is a fantastic physical performance. I don't think that's ever going to go away. What you could do is maybe heighten that with a whole lot of additional technologies with it, but I think the core base of still being able to go out and be entertained is really what we're talking about, and being able to tell a story in a way that connects with your audience. And so all the new technologies allow us today are additional tool sets that we can actually do that storytelling.
So, you have been hearing everyone. We're going to throw this open to questions. So if you have a question, a really good one, put your hand up after the next round, and we will come to you hopefully with a microphone. And you need to ask a specific question. Don't ask for any money, but we will try our best to answer it. I just wanted to stay on that point for a moment. We are now giving birth to an accelerated level of learning for the future of entertainment. At Waves, you've heard multiple people talking about the Indian Institute of Creative Technologies, which many of us have been encouraging for some time, and it's now a reality. So what you are practicing is at the cusp of where movement arts is meeting the visual arts, right? And therefore, while Dan is much more visual and kind of making sure that he protects the integrity of the movement arts in the virtual world, how are you embracing this ability for the visual arts to inform you more and more in the performance arts and the acting that you create?
That's a great question. So what we're doing on the current project I'm working on with Dan is exactly that. So when we're talking about coming up with ideas for the action sequences in the project we're working on, which is Ramayana. So then those ideas are way beyond what we would normally be talking about in a contemporary film. So what I do is I lean into the technology that's available, which is motion capture. It's the Unreal Engine. It's then using all the technical skills that, like, we're working with some, really incredibly young technicians in the Unreal world at the moment doing what we're doing. And it's the ability of using that technology to actually craft what we want to do is telling the story of the action. And that then allows us to then share that with the director, the producers of production. It gets you a sign-off on it in a way that you could never do before. Before, in my craft, it would be cardboard boxes and video cameras. That was the only way you could try and tell a story. Now we're able to tell a story of gods and demigods and flying creatures and people flying and people fighting and thousands of people being involved in a sequence. That's impossible a little while ago. So what's great about the tool set is that I can tell that story now, and that story gets us to the position that we can then go out and film it. So I can't do my current job in the way that I do it if it wasn't embracing all the technologies that are currently available. And that's what makes for me, the storytelling always interesting. I'm technology agnostic. I have trouble turning my computer on sometimes, but I know what the outcome of what I would like to see happen. And so what it allows me to do is to tap into a lot of people, like with the skills of Dan now, that then allow me to be able to tell that story in the best way I possibly can.
So you heard it from both of them that they are going to create one of India's most epic stories. They're working on it now, where you have avatars, creatures, gods, goddesses, all in one phenomenal tale, and it requires both of those skills. And I think that the beauty of VFX is that it allows the past, the stories of the past, to meet the future without losing its soul. I think that's the really important part of it. Is there a question from the audience that anyone has that we can put to our two panelists here? If so, please raise your hand. Yes, right in front.
Hello everybody, my name is Joy Sahuja and I'm a young animation director. First of all, thank you so much for those incredible insights. It's been a great learning experience from all of you. So my question is, now, as the title suggests, we can truly craft the impossible. We can create any unimaginable world, planets and light years away. We can bring it here on Earth and create whatever we want. Now, Mr. Guy, you were mentioning on the importance of how storytelling is really key. And I was wondering if you could just go into that. Like, a dragon with huge details is very immersive, but a story will connect with the viewer, right? So how would you suggest we connect with the audiences, not just with the technology, but on an emotional level, so we can convey the messages and themes that we want to?
Okay, so I think the base is that you just want to tell a good story. So, and you don't need technology to do that. So it's finding it's really finding what your story is about and the characters, and then building on that. And then the technology should allow you how to tell that story in the way that you want to do it. So it could be a story of the three of us here, and we could be sitting in a lounge room, or we could be in a spaceship, or we could be on another planet or another world. So it's finding what the source of your story is first and be true to your story, and then the technology should then allow you to show that in a way that you couldn't show it before. That's really the difference. When we all started, storytelling really started around the fireplace, I don't know how many millenniums ago. And so now we're still doing the same thing, which is telling stories. We're just using different tool sets. But a good story is still a good story. You know, we've all seen films that are incredible and amazing, and they're a visual overload, and you leave the cinema, and 10 minutes later you probably don't even know what it was really about. So it's the technology does not overshadow the fact that you always have to have a good story first. The technology can enhance it to a degree that then you get something really special.
One of my favorite, first time at Kidscreen 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I met this incredible person who crafted stories, had a slate deal with Nickelodeon for 5 or 7 years. The studio in New York was called The Little Airplane. And I asked him, how did you start becoming a storyteller? And he was a street performer. He said that if you're on the street and you're hungry and you don't have a livelihood, the only way you can get people around you to put money into that hat is by the quality of how you engage them. So no matter if you're a musician or a storyteller or a juggler or anyone, the only way you learn that people will actually follow you, either on that street or on the screen or anywhere, is the quality of your acting. And I think that's a great example to take away, that if you know how to engage people around you, you will be able to do that for a channel, for a producer, for a studio, for any kind of pitch that you tell. What AI can do is to give you a few iterations to cue you up a little bit better. So we asked him this simple question. We were 40 people in a room, and he said, tell me something about how I can tell you a story. And I was sitting in the first row with my croissant and my coffee, and I said, can you tell me a story about this magic croissant? And he thought for 2 minutes and made this amazing pitch that you thought he would have been working on for years, because he knew at the back of it that he was looking around at that room, at the 40 of us, and could actually blow us away with this episodic story of the magic croissant on the spot, because he was a street actor that knew how to engage people. And I think that is the connection. It's about the connection. It's about making sure that you can shoot an arrow to the person's head and heart at the same time. And how do you do that in the virtual world?
I think as Guy said, with performance and emotion comes first. And I always feel like, despite all the technologies we have at our fingertips, you need first to imagine, you need first to visualize and project that story, and then the tools should be the things that help you communicate it. And I sometimes feel I and perhaps Guy have an advantage, because certainly at the beginning of our careers, these technologies didn't exist. And so we were forced to kind of be much more adept at using the things at our hands. And sometimes now we become, or we risk becoming lazy with the ability of the technologies we have. And I would always recommend that we pause before we get into the technologies, think about the story, think about the power, think about the connection, and then use the technology to tell that story, however immersive or fantastical the world.
Dan, I've got a question for you. Over here. at the podium.
Can I just say that was incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who's got the mic? Please stand up and raise your hand so we
I'm
can...
over here.
All right, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, the question is, in one of the earlier Batman films, it was Jack Nicholson's character who said it's the mind that makes the movies. But in the days to come, do you think AI would be able to do it all with a superhuman imagination?
It's the human imagination that I think still trumps the technologies available. I have yet to see or believe that AI can, although it can create a vast array of very impressive and amazing, seemingly original content, it is yet to show me that it can interpret that emotionally and figure out, what is going to be the story that's the most powerful to communicate a message to people.
I can see Yunus Bukhari's hand up. He always has a tough question for us. Yunus, will you stand up and get a microphone and be nice to us, please? He's a visual effects supervisor who understands, the local context well, and it's phenomenal that we have two amazing people working on such an iconic project in India that really bridges the gaps, and I'd like to come back to that later, of how do you cross cultures with the wonderful work that you do in the stories, right? We'll come back to that in a minute. But in the meantime, we are going to be challenged by Yunus.
Yes, of course, it's a very simple question on behalf of everyone who is using the AI. Today, it is the hallucination and the fashion also of using AI. My question to you, Biren, and as well as partly to Dan, on behalf of the entire community, how best we can able to protect our IPs from our employees, or isn't it that we are exposing our entire IPs globally?
Okay. In a new world, how do you protect the intellectual property that you create? I think I'll let you go first. I brought a report on anti-piracy to answer his question. It's only 40 pages. I'll read it to you right now. No, I'm just joking. Okay, carry on.
Honestly, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question. I absolutely stand by the need and uphold the idea that that should be protected. I think it is increasingly challenging in the world we have today to protect ideas, originality, and AI, of course, is feeding on a vast amount of information, and it's hard to tell, if not impossible to tell sometimes, what it is using for its gathering, its reference. Legislation, trust, I think still are going to be key, but I think there will always be situations where you cannot guarantee that people are not subverting that. There are, interestingly, aspects of AI that are tracking how AI, is analyzing things that is kind of like the anti or the polar aspect of AI technologies that is trying to track how images and references are used. But how to absolutely guarantee and ensure it, I think it is a very difficult challenge.
So I just want to make the point, Yunus, to your question, that through COVID and since COVID, we've had maybe 250,000 artists in India that have worked remotely. Large studios have a combination of hybrid working in studio and across the country. I want for everyone in this audience to please applaud the Indian talent that has worked for these 5 years on hundreds of projects without an incident. I think it needs an applause. Okay? Because it shows that you can trust artists in a way that you create a secure environment, as DNEG does and MPC did and Tramestore and many other companies do, where I think we have the tools and the technology and the governance to make sure that we can work that way. But I think Yunus's question was more about the intellectual property of titles. That if you are going to work on a movie, and this is a story from folklore or mythology, how will you protect that from becoming a property somewhere in the world? The simple answer is that you can't protect the story because it's public domain. but you can protect the liveliness of that figure. So if you go back 20 years when the first little Hanuman came out, I mean, you can't say that Hanumanji is my IP, but that little Hanuman in that likeness, in that character, definitely is something that was protected by the studio that made it at that point of time. And I do believe that, you know, we do need to take a bold view on the fact that we have stories to tell. And just like the stories are told, I mean, there are versions of the Ramayana that are done in other people's IP and cultural context. In the same way, we have to be very bold-faced about it. And I do believe that there will always be a problem with piracy. We did a phenomenal panel with, you know, on what should happen, and it's getting better through streaming. Music had died some time back until the walled gardens came out in the way that music happens today, and it's gone up 9 times in the last 5 years in terms of its revenues. So I think technology has to come in and protect it. But I have one final view, and I'll pass it on here, that, by the way, the biggest innovators in the world are the crooks. Because, you know, when people spend $100 million to create a secure environment around something, and then 2 guys sitting or 5 guys sitting somewhere hack into it, all it does is to make sure that you raise your game. Because they're going to innovate faster and faster. And that's the nature of the world that we live in. So it's not about running away from it. It's about embracing it and making sure that you play your game in a better way. I think that's the only thing to do. Do you have a view on this?
Look, I think we're living in a great time, especially for everybody in the audience that has an interest in film or technology. There is an ability now for you all to have what I call a seat at the table. And in the past, you know, to be able to be involved in larger productions or any film production, there was a very clear path of many, many, many years of working. What's opened up now, and as an example, I'm just working with a couple of young guys I've just left to come and do the talk. They're probably under 25 years of age. And they've done here animation degrees. They're now part of the DNEG world. And they're incredibly talented young guys that are using Unreal as a great tool. And we're using that as a storytelling device. And that is something that, as a 25-year-old, is a very great position to be in, because I'm relying on that person's skill set to tell a story at a very high level. And so that's the great ability today. And what I like about the whole idea of the waves is the idea of the technology and sharing of that and opening up, you know, the world of the craft of technicians here in India, is that all of that's available to anybody now, to basically go out and learn the technology, which is all there, and that gives you literally an ability to be able to have a seat at the table on these sort of giant productions that hopefully are coming through here. And that's a whole different era of how you could become involved in film than it was in my day. So that's the most important thing. Just embrace it. Embrace it. It becomes a tool set. How can you use it as a storytelling device? And I'm sure there's so many young people who can tell a story in such a way more expansive way than, you know, from Dan and my era, when there was just not the tool set available to do that. So I would just say embrace it all and use it.
Coming into the close, we'll take one question. Stand up at the back there. Yeah. Before we go there, will technology give us a better, obviously technology will keep improving the quality of what we put on screen, right? It'll be, the pixel world will just keep getting better and better. But can a Dune 3 or a Dune 4 be made at a better quality but at half the price? And do you think that's the direction of travel?
The age-old question that we always get from the filmmakers and studios, for sure. Yeah, they want to see something that's never been seen before, that's better than before, for less money, in less time, usually. Yeah. My experience, what the technologies do is enable you to do more. It's rare that the costs actually come down. I mean, to do the same thing that we did 20 years ago is definitely much more affordable to do now. The costs are less, but the demands are higher. And so we're always asked to do more. We need to do more. As we mentioned earlier, that I think the audiences are demanding more. The they wouldn't be satisfied with the kind of work that we put out, 20, 30 years ago. And so, although individual things might have come down in cost, I think that the fact that we have to do more at higher quality means that ultimately costs don't go down at the end of the day.
I think, artistry and skill is something that moves from the physical world to the virtual world. Vichar, can you please put your hand up and just stand up for a second? So here is a person who was doing real life sculpting in the palace of the Mysore king, and today is in the world of technology, a world leader and an ambassador for the best tools in the world on sculpting and 3D modeling. So you can use the soul of the artist doesn't change, but the way in which you bring it to life, it changes dramatically. It's the same with production. I mean, you have Merzen looking at production in, many parts of India and many parts of the world, and tools will only make that happen in a better and better fashion. We've got people in the front here from Rotomaker. There's Mike here who, I don't know where he lives in the world, but he lives on an airplane and has thousands of artists that do meticulous work overnight. I mean, the roto gets delivered like, 24/7 following the sun. And I do think that all of this can only get better with AI, because all you're going to do is to have more production tools, more creative tools, more iteration tools, certainly in the development of content, right? I think the ability to play with story ideas and make them happen at iterations at a faster and faster pace. Maybe you want to create certain stunts and you at least get the visual cue. Maybe it won't do the entire stunt, but it'll give you some directions and some thoughts that would provoke it the other way around. We prompt AI, but AI can prompt you in the direction of, hey, this is the 5 ways in which you could probably enact that scene. I think that's the world that we're living in. It's kind of a virtuous cycle that will move forward. We'll take the last question from the person at the back who did stand up. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for all the valuable insights. It's a great panel. My question is more from a business perspective, as in with AI and all the technology being more accessible to filmmakers. Do you in the future see an off balance in creators versus audience? Because the audience somehow will stay the same, but we'll have more creators, and hence a challenge of where actually all these stories are being viewed, and hence the question of, are the creators going to be actually having an ROI on what they so passionately indulge in, versus it just filmmaking just becoming a hobby more than a business, because it was accessible to very few people or the privileged few in the past, and now sitting behind an AI generated computer, I mean, anybody can be the visualizer to director to filmmaker.
We got it. It's a good question. So I want to ask the entire room, how many of you have a story in your head that you want to make? Put your hands up, everybody. You got the answer. For half, the beginning of that answer is, every person I've ever met has got a story that he or she wants to make. And the more money they have, the more determined they are. I meet all the people who sold their IT companies, and the first thing they ask me is, do you know I have a movie in my head that I want to produce? So it applies to everyone. And it's obvious that the tools and the technologies today make them create their short film. They can go and put it on YouTube. They don't need to find a distributor. This is the given. Your question really is, one part of your question is something that I don't agree with, and I'm throwing that open to the panel. People remain the same. They do not remain the same. Their expectations change.
Sorry, if I may interrupt. I'm not saying people remain the same. I'm saying the amount or the percentage of audience that you have will in numbers be the same. As you had 3 movies being made 50 years back versus 300 being made today.
I hope Mr. Ajay Bijli is not listening to from PVR. I'll be very disappointed. But back to the story, I think every format will keep having its own level of growth. I don't know how to answer this question from an AI perspective, but the question really is, more people are creating stuff, and therefore, how will it pose an issue for those that really want to be spending lots of money and hoping that lots of people will see what they create? And how does AI work into all this?
Well, I guess I'll broach the first part as I see it, which is that there may be a populace and an audience level out there, but there are more and more ways that people can access content. 10 years ago, a fraction of the people were watching the amount of things that they do on their phones, on screens that are around our world. And so there are actually many, many more modes of content being presented, and actually the demands on generation of content are going up exponentially because of that. So I don't think there's an issue with creators not having a forum to present their things. I do think that the challenges nowadays are about exposure. Like how do you make your story or get your story to be the thing that everybody watches? And that's a challenge that people face, from the largest studios to the content creators on YouTube and other channels. I'm not going to get into how the models that the studios are looking at, because they're having to reassess the way that they, what kinds of movies they make, how many movies they make, which are related to your question. But I do think that actually the other thing I was going to say with audiences is that the concentration time, or the time and length of stories and visual bites that people watch has gone down considerably. And so there's need for more places to show content, but there's also the nature of the content, and the time that people are watching it is also shorter. So there's really lots and lots of, I think, room for ideas, especially shorter pieces that people are keen to watch.
The business part of your question was,
yes.
How do you, the business part of your question is that I think you've seen in the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that the business model is changing quite rapidly. But what I think has also endured is the fact that people that have predicted the death or the demise of a certain platform, take print. The revenue in this country on print in any particular year in the last 15 years is exactly the same as the revenue from film. We make 1,900 films. I don't know how many tens of thousands of newspapers there are, or thousands there are, but the revenue is the same. But everyone said the print would go away. It hasn't gone away. It just comes on in a different digital form. And therefore people said, okay, TV will do this, streaming will kill linear. All this, I mean, these are the things that we talk about. I think some models just have a different way. I mean, there are some publications you can only see through subscription, and there are others that you don't, because they can get more advertising revenue. So the business models will go according to what has to happen. One of the things that I will leave anyone as a young creator in the audience to think about, if you're a studio, you are as good as the weakest of these 5 things. Creativity, technology, production management, talent management, money management. The weakest of these 5 defines whether you will survive or not, if that's a studio. If you're a creator, it depends on how you are going to find the ability for one of those studio folks or someone like that, preferably a distributor, right? Could be a publisher for a game, could be a channel for a TV series, could be a producer for a movie. In the Indian context, it's different in different countries. But those are the folks that you need to make sure, and you need to then make sure that you're going to get paid for every step of your way. Because there are too many products being made and too little success, and that, I think, is the equation that we need to change from a business perspective. And there needs to be a better understanding. For example, there are no schools in India that taught production management till a few years ago, and even now there are very, very few in our industry. So I think those are the kinds of things that will really help people to figure out how to manage all of these 5 variables. And I think the startup economy of this country and the things that are happening around it, and I think events that will take place, and the IICT and many other institutions will make that happen as well. But I think this was not meant to be that kind of a conversation, but you did ask an important question, and I think cash is really important for everyone. I come from a company that didn't manage its cash well, and I think that's where we are. And therefore, we have to make the next thing happen in a very productive fashion. I think we've had a great panel. I think we're at the end of all the important things we wanted to say. There was a great intelligence in putting this together because we didn't prepare for what we were going to say. We were going to make sure that we brought the best out of Dan and Guy, and I hope that the two of you have a phenomenal journey in India, creating what we think is going to be an absolute masterpiece, and work with the talent and the technologies that we have here and in your organization. So on that note, if there's a closing comment of how you're looking at the next few years, we can end with that and then with you.
Look, I would just say for everybody, as I said before, just the technology is there to be embraced and used, but the core thing is you have to use it in the right way to tell the story that you're trying to tell. That's really it. So storytelling first, the technology is just going to allow you to deliver that in perhaps a quicker, faster, but maybe more visual way. But storytelling is the start and the finish.
Yeah, I think along similar lines, I just encourage people to continue to dream, imagine, aspire to things. Innovation and technology is driven by that, and it's the ideas that should look to the tools to help, communicate those ideas and create them, and not the other way around.
I was looking around the room very carefully, and I'm happy to tell you that no one fell asleep. So I just want to, first of all, ask you to join me in giving a big round of applause to our two panelists here and to yourselves, and thank you very much for being at Waves for this conversation. Take away the fact that you need to work with the physical and the virtual and make the best out of both those worlds. So thank you very much, both of you.